it going?
Hey Neil, how are you? Good to see you.
Mr. Henry?
You almost lost it.
Neil?
Okay. And I've got some questions.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen.
Well, here, let me show you.
Welcome to the February 13th meeting of the Septic-to-Sewer Citizens Advisory Committee. Can we have roll call, please?
Sure. Chair Neil Hennigan,
Present.
Member Ron Kern,
Present.
Member John Liscombe,
Present.
Vice Chair Arthur Zev.
Present.
Let the record show that Member Shines is absent with notice.
Pledge of allegiance, please. Pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, normally at this point we'd be doing approval of the minutes. For anyone that was in attendance at the last meeting, it was extremely long, extremely detailed, had some quite complicated presentations, and consequently it's given us a delay in getting the meeting minutes from that January 9th meeting. So could we have a motion to defer the minutes until the next meeting?
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Public comment, please. Wow. Amazing.
Remarkable.
Terry, you're
Terry,
letting
what's
me
the matter,
down.
Terry?
I'm in shock. It's going to take a couple minutes to hold it down. So, Ann, no comment? Okay. I have a few remarks to get us started on this meeting. This meeting is going to differ a little bit from the previous meetings that we've had. The past meetings have all been basically driven by outside experts or outside subject matter. This one, we're going to begin the process of this being more of like a working session, a workshop session. Looking for more input from members of the committee, looking for more give and take up here on the dais, and sharing our thoughts and opinions with you, the public. So I'd like to put this workshop into context, and I'd like to give my personal perspective. I'd like to reiterate that this is a study committee, a planning body that is here to assess, explore, evaluate, and eventually to recommend. It is not the implementing authority. That is the town commission. And the commission has asked us to outline the steps necessary, uncover the choices, the pitfalls, and make recommendations that will put our town in a positive, responsive position within the next 5 years. After months of assessing and exploring, today we begin the discussion of those preliminary steps, choices, and actions that need to occur during this time frame. The committee has a straw man roadmap to guide us in this process. I would like to open it to the committee to get their opinion on using that straw man as a roadmap, as a format to move forward, or have them recommend some alternatives. Mr. Zev?
Could you, I don't understand the term straw man, would you?
Well, I'm not Boynton Beach making a proposal. All I am doing is outlining the types of questions and ideas that I've heard over the last 3 months and putting them in a document. I'm not espousing them as my position. I'm not espousing them as this committee's position, but I am trying to give us a skeleton to hang on to go forward. The amount of additional things that we put on that or the things that we eliminate, that's up to us, the committee.
And
There was nothing behind it, I just had, not familiar with that term, straw man. is what I
Okay.
meant by it.
Yeah,
So,
it just means it's there for you to either burn it down or to flesh it out. So, that comes from a military background, that's what you did. You put it up there and it either walked away or it got shot down.
okay.
So, Mr. Kern?
Well, I think you need to be applauded. This, the roadmap that you sent out is really quite extensive and, in my opinion, very well done. One of the things that we talked about at the last meeting was the fact that because of the constraints that we have with the Sunshine Law, is that things are being done in serial. So we do something, we come back, we report, somebody comes back to report.
Correct.
Yeah, but that extends this process a long time. What you've done here is it allows us to handle big chunks of this in pieces where when the meeting becomes more than just a serial, we can handle many subjects at one time. I like what you've done, and I'm eager to see where you want to go with this.
Yeah, I would like us to not do it sequentially. I think we need to do it episodically, but not sequentially. So if something from one area makes us jump and discuss a concept that extends through it or should have been brought into another area, I think we should do that. And I think that's the give and take here that we need to start having, so we stop this process of this iterative, only once a month do we make any little tiny step. So, John?
Well, you did an amazing amount of work, so thank you very much. I'm not sure where we're going with all of this, because there's nothing mandated, there's nothing said that this is going forward, and the amount of work we've done, I almost think we should wrap it up and keep it until things move forward. You know, there's nothing on the horizon, there's nothing that's gonna say this is gonna happen. So this is great for now, if it all happened today, but nothing's happening today. We don't know if it's 2 years, 6 years. I kind of think it may be 10 years minimum before go ahead.
So we are planning for the future. So we need to have a document that we send forward to the town commission with all of the plans. Once you get that document prepared, then you can start to make your recommendations. Your recommendation could be, here's your document, let's wait 5 years. Or here's your document, let's wait until a mandate comes.
What does the document say exactly?
This is gonna be your master plan for a septic to sewer conversion with
But
all.
how can you come up with a master plan when, you know, if it doesn't happen for 10 years from now, technologies are gonna change, prices are gonna change, everything, so we're just coming up with hypotheticals.
Of course, but you're gonna have that roadmap in place for when it comes time.
But everything changes, I mean, everything, that's what I'm saying, is like, this is for today, which is great.
I mean, prices are gonna change.
Drastically,
Certainly.
technologies are gonna change drastically. And, you know, I was thinking about, so the vacuum system obviously, or I think is the best system if we decided today on that. But in 10 years from now, 20 years from now, maybe the roads need to be raised. Maybe the gravity system comes into play at that point, because it'd be cheaper to actually put a gravity system in under the road and raise the road at the same time. So there's so many unknowns. I don't know how we could come up with a plan and stick with that plan. I mean, we can for today and say that this works, you know, today, if everything happened, but who knows down the line?
And let me add, so along that lines, if, like, it does appear from what we've heard from the engineering firm that the vacuum system today might be the best way to go. But, I mean, what are they expecting in the plan beyond saying, yes, we think, and I think Neil's maybe, I'm not speaking for him, but he put in the plan,
Right.
looking for concurrence. So we approve that we make the recognition, yeah, we think vacuum is the best. What are they expecting beyond that? I mean, hiring a firm to draw preliminary plans? You know,
Well,
No.
along that line, I differ with John. I think there are things that should have started yesterday, never mind wait 5 years to start them. I think a significant item is going to be how do you get this process started? Well, the wheels of anything that is municipal starts with dollars. And I don't think we have the luxury of waiting 5 years to start acquiring the funds to start this process if and when that time comes. And along the lines of, should we do planning today or should we do planning later? And I'm talking about more detailed planning than what we have here. If we were going to do it on the town's dime, I agree, we wait. But if we were going to do this on the grant dime, the more that we get done now on somebody else's nickel, I want to start doing it. I want to advocate going down that road. Now, what do I think of the success of that? I have no idea what the grant success is going to be. But I don't want to wait 5 years to say we should be looking for grants and we wait 5 years to do it. I would like to start asking for a grant now.
Well, the grant guy who came and spoke with us said that he could gear up very quickly to start looking for grants. He said 6 months he could be out there looking for us.
Okay,
When he came and spoke.
and I understand that, and other people that we've had in the process that we haven't been able to share because we don't discuss things at meetings are advocating that the sooner we go talk to people about the grants, the better off we'll be. That if we wait till later, we're in a queue. As soon as we can get ready and show that we are a willing and able community, and that we've made a commitment as a community, the better our chances are of A, either finding out that we have the grant, or B, finding out that there'll never be a grant, and we better understand where our internal funding is going to come from. Talking to Lisa about this type of project, if let's just ballpark it, I don't know whether we'll be 25 million, 30 million, $35 million, but 10 to 15% of that is a big number. Look at the town's tax base. We have a budget that from assessed valuations, we bring in what, about $5.5 million a year? So we're talking about something for planning, engineering, and permitting that is going to approach 1 year's town revenue. That's not going to come out of our pocket later. Even the reserves that we have would only meet half of that amount of money. So what I would like to see us do is start looking at where over that 5 years we can, either through the grants or through some sort of infrastructure assessment that we start on the town, that we start acquiring that money, setting it aside, and that whenever that planning has to occur, that money is going to be available to us to hit the ground running. Our neighboring communities are going to approach things very differently. I don't think Manalapan's going to care about grants, and Gulfstream already has the luxury. They have already set aside a fund to do this kind of stuff, and I think we are not. Let's just say I think we're late to the party. Okay.
Neil, if I may,
Go ahead.
I think, from what I see, this whole exercise, what we're doing is being driven because it's a environmental impact that's affecting us. These mandates aren't coming down just because they want us to switch over to a sewer system. It's coming down because the effect upon sewer systems, okay, basically affect the waters around us. And as far as I'm concerned, we would be derelict if we didn't continue down this road. Waiting for a mandate to come doesn't solve any of the environmental issues. Matter of fact, I could make a case they're worse. That it would be our responsibility, at least, to try to lay out I'll call it a roadmap as well, a roadmap that you could give to the town when in fact you wanted to do. We don't have to wait for a mandate. That's number one. Number two, if a mandate does come, you at least have a structure in place where you can start filling in the blanks rather quickly, money being one of them, and other things. My opinion is to fold the tent up right now would be short-sighted.
I want to follow up on one thing that you commented about the grants and that John mentioned. So one of the thoughts that I had, we had that presentation, the person said that thinks that there's money out there to start the process. So I would support moving forward on that, to try to work with that individual or an appropriate individual to try to bring in that grant money to help pay for whatever preliminary work needs to be done. And along that line, so the question, I mean, I don't know where you envision that grant money going, but I'm jumping ahead here one. I mean, one of them, use of that money would be to work with Ingenuity or a specialized firm to get their arms around the engineering technical side. So for example, we had the one representative of the vacuum system saying, oh, we only need one crossing, and then, but the other folks are saying two. So, I mean, we need an independent entity and a qualified engineering firm to, and maybe working with Boynton to make that kind of decision. So maybe grant money can go to that. Secondly, and I'm jumping ahead here, you talking here about how are we gonna pay for it? What mechanism are we gonna use? How are the homeowners gonna pay the assessments? We had the folks from Raftellus, that's the name of their firm.
Correct.
I mean, I think that's something that they would be, that we could get the money to pay them to say, okay, here are the 4 or 5 options that you have under the law, and based on some cost estimate of a vacuum system, they then can do the analysis, so we'll know, oh, if we do this system, this is how much it's gonna cost every homeowner. If we use that allocation system, it's gonna cost Y. That would then give us as an advisory board ability to say, we can discuss that and say, oh, our recommendation is you assess people based on this methodology. So, just to encapsulate is to go with the grant.
Go ahead.
Try to pursue the
Yeah,
grant.
and thank you for saying that, because I was gonna bring that up later in the meeting under the funding topic. The town commission has given money for Raftellus to do that kind of financial work, and I think it's gonna be time soon to get them on board so that they can give this committee the information that they need.
And just for the record, I had nothing against that firm, I just thought it was
Right.
premature because we hadn't determined how
Correct.
they can benefit. I mean,
Yes.
This is how I think they can.
And I still
Yeah.
think it's a little premature. Tracy and I have had the discussion offline about when is the appropriate time to bring Raftellus into this. Because clearly, they have expertise that goes way beyond any of us up here. But it would be nice to find out what type of grant we would be going out seeking, because the grant could be under a whole bunch of different formats. As the grant guy said, we could be, asking for things for an environmental reason. We could be asking for things as a disaster recovery reason. So I think we would want to know, I think it would be sort of crazy to go ahead and start paying Raftellus if there was a way of a grant paying Raftellus.
Oh, I agree.
So that's sort of why one reason why we've been deferring it. Personally, another reason I would like to defer it, and this is for what I think is the next meeting, which is crunching that nut that you're talking about, is how do we allocate these costs to the town? Because I think there are quite a few topics of fairness, of availability, of how to distribute things, and I think that deserves a meeting of its own. And I think we need to do some of that before we engage Raftellus. I personally didn't want Raftellus coming in here with some recipe that they've used somewhere else, or how they view the subject without the input of the town and some identity of the town, of us knowing that, this is the kind of community we have. We have X number of homes or condos that are in this category, and we've got RSE property at this extreme end, and maybe one size doesn't fit all. And the same thing with Boynton. When Boynton came and made a presentation to us, Boynton was talking about how to fund this thing based on the system that they have. But Boynton is an existing utility with an existing base, with a methodology for how you, as a new person, buy into the equity of the system that exists. Whereas in this town, we're now starting this thing from the ground up. And the way we decide to fund this is going to affect what happens from now until the end of whatever, that people are going to be hooking up into this system. And that doesn't necessarily mean we get to do it the same way a big utility does it. So I wanted us to start looking at some of that subject stuff, and then when we do engage Raftellus, we can say, you know, we'd like you to consider these things in your funding and costing model. Do you think that's fair?
Well, let me just share with you a little from my experience of doing these type of transactions. So the market, the lenders, they are going to accept one of, let's say, 4 different mechanisms for assessing the individuals. And I think that and I'm not saying I'm not saying they need to start right away. I appreciate your timing. But I think what I was thinking is Raftellus can do a study based on an estimated cost and say, okay, do you want to do it? Do you assess based on the frontage of the property? Do you assess based on ERUs? Do you assess based on the number of toilets? Do you, or you know,
Exactly.
and so they can do that study because there is a limited universe of what the investment market will accept.
Sure, I understand
And
that.
so, I mean, they could do that at any point in time based on the number. The other thing I wanted to just mention is that I think if this is eventually financed with tax-exempt bonds, any soft costs that you incur, regardless, you know, you can issue the bonds in 3 years. If we were to spend money today on studies, you could get reimbursed from that in the bond issue going forward. So,
Correct.
or
That's
you
right.
could even get, you know, the bank could give us a little loan and then roll it into that at that point. So it might have less impact on the budget. But your idea of setting money aside, I thought was brilliant.
Right, and I'm not disagreeing that even after you acquire this fund, this nest egg, that you actually apply it to here, it may make sense to do exactly what you said, have that money so that we show an earnest effort. It is available if we want to use it. If we go to the bond market, whatever that dollar is gonna cost us X multiples of that dollar to pay it back over 10, 15, 20 years. Maybe we wanna have spent that money and reduce the size of that bond, but all those are choices. And I'm just advocating that start doing some savings now, and then that gives us a choice later. If we don't save it, we only have the choice that you're saying, that's to go out and lease the whole thing. I mean, and we all make those choices with cars and everything else.
Neil?
Go ahead,
So, about Raftellus, we can, well, they've already been hired. The town commission has already signed a contract to hire them.
Sure.
We can engage them now and have them do the work, and we can be reimbursed by grant funding later for them. We don't have to wait for the grant to come in to engage them. Just like when a storm comes in, we pay and then we get reimbursed by FEMA. It's the same thing
Sure.
here. So we could engage them now and have them give us the information that we need
Well, maybe.
and be reimbursed. And I just want to give you other information too. Tony from Raftellus called me yesterday and said that the city of Boynton has put out an RFP for financial services, and if we're not going to engage them this year, they want to go after that contract because they're not seeing any funds from us. We've hired them, but we're not using them. And they can't do it if it's a conflict with our contract with them.
Why would it be a conflict?
I'm not sure. He said there would be a conflict.
Well, it's hard to imagine that we're not gonna be small potatoes in that
Yeah,
comparison.
that's a little fish.
I just don't want to lose them. That's
Pardon?
all. I don't want to lose them as our contractor.
Okay.
Well,
I don't, that's, just for the record, I'm not sure I appreciate that comment, you know, sort of that pressure being placed on the town, I think. I find that intriguing.
Yes.
Would you like them to at least come and talk to you, or talk to me and I can have them submit something to you as to why that would be a conflict?
That would be very
that'd
helpful.
be cool.
And then you might also, so sorry.
No, please,
You might
please.
also ask them why they're would even be worried about our dinky little contract compared to what the Boynton Beach contract would be.
Well, I don't know if it's anything big. It could be something small for one of their, smaller projects, but,
But what I was gonna say is that, as you pointed out about communication, and everybody's gonna wanna know, how much is this gonna cost me? So I would think that, it's,
And when?
to take a first pass at what the cost would be under those different methodologies, really wouldn't be that big of a study. So, I mean, I think that might be helpful to let everybody really understand what it's gonna cost.
Well, I mean, from what we've all looked at and heard, do you think it's going to be that much out of line with what Boynton said? I don't.
Well,
So I think Boynton gave us the luxury of the first cut at not only preliminary planning, but technology and costing. I think we got that for free. We didn't have to go out and ask Raftelis, and we didn't have to go out and hire an engineering firm. Boynton hired AECOM. According to Lisa, they're extremely competent. And I just,
correct me, I don't remember, did they just say how much it was per house? I mean, did they?
no, they gave us an overall number.
Right, and, you're right, they gave us an overall number.
Right.
What I'm saying is,
And I think you can take that overall number and you can pretty quickly distill that down to what, each person's piece is. I mean, I got the data from PAPA. I've been going through it and validating it. There's 1,471 taxable parcels in this town. Those are the people that, if and when we do something, are gonna be on the hook for the money.
well, and you're right, those are the people who are on the hook, but do you allocate based on, do you assess based on ERUs? Do you assess based on frontage of the property? So like I said, there's 3 or 4 mechanisms out there. So-
I agree, but what you can still do is you're still gonna have an average amount that's going to have to be paid. How you shift and skew that curve is going to be based on either some use of taxable value, assessed value, ERUs, whatever, but all you're going to be doing is taking away from Peter and putting it on Paul. It's not gonna change the average. The average is still going to be whatever that number is divided by the parcel. And we are talking about a number that's probably in the order of 25 to 30K.
I would think that decision as to how to allocate it among condo units versus single family versus townhomes might be one of your most difficult decisions, so.
Correct, and I think that should be the subject of the next meeting, is to start looking at that enough to then go to Raftelis after that.
And I would just simply say, I don't know how we can, if we don't know what the numbers are, what the breakdown is, how can we discuss it? So, there's my.
Anyone else comment? So, in terms of items to actually try to accomplish at this meeting, I would like us to take some action on doing what Ron talked about. I actually, in that document, identified him as the expert on trying to get an environmental impact evaluation started.
I do appreciate the menial task that you gave. Sorry.
Are you adverse to that?
No, but when you get to it, I'd like to comment on a couple of the line items that you had here.
Yeah, I mean, I would like to start getting into that, the first item here on the agenda, and that is it.
For those, can they see that up there? There it is. The beginning of what you've asked for in basically the first couple of sentences is just basically grunt work calculations. This data is available. we can find it out, we can come up with all kind of statistical stuff on it, and that would give you a baseline for that. I don't have any problem with that. That's just getting this information from the town and other sources is, work that
Putting
we've
it in a
already.
usable format.
Yeah, and put it in some sort of presentational format that can be utilized. That, to me, is not a problem. It's the last sentence here that says, determine and quantify reduction of nitrogen and phosphorus loads attainable. What you're really talking about here is nitrates, okay? Nitrates is the byproduct that comes from sewage treatment, whether it's plants or septic, doesn't matter. They all work the same way. The nitrates are the ones that are the danger. Nitrates form, when they get in the water, they form algae, starves the water of oxygen and kills the fish and other marine life. So that's why this is what this is all about. Up and down the coast, doesn't matter where we are, that's what they want to eliminate by having municipal sewage systems. So to determine that nitrogen, a little bit of chemistry exercise here. Sewage treatment comes in as ammonia. Ammonia in the nitration process ends up with nitrites first, which is 1 part nitrogen and 2 parts oxygen. And then as the process goes along, it goes to nitrate, which is 1 part nitrogen and 3 parts oxygen. So what they do to make the wastewater, basically change it from waste to water, clean water, is that you put bacteria or naturally grown bacteria in a tank. When the sewage goes into it, bacteria needs oxygen to survive. So what it does is it attacks the nitrate, grabs the oxygen, releases the nitrogen, which is no problem, it's a gas and it's harmless. And what comes out of that, I'm being very simplistic here, what comes out of that is clean water. That happens in every process, I don't care what the size of the plant is or septic system. To determine that, the quantity of reducing the nitrogen and phosphorus, it's also potassium in that, because that's used in agricultural pesticides and everything else, and that's part of the problem, is that you have to look at how you would reduce this in terms of the types of discharge, the effluent water discharge that goes out that can mix. If you're running a plant, all right, whether it's to a drain field or to an injection well, that is tested. We all have testing, and those testings are based on an EPA regulation of 1 milligram per liter of nitrates in drinking water. And our plants are all licensed for that, and that's what the EPA standard is for drinking water. So when it comes out of a plant, first the injection well sends it down 125 feet, it bubbles up to the aquifer, and then there's a monitoring well, and twice a month or once a month, depending upon the plant's license, they pull a sample of that and they test it for exactly that amount. The plant that I run is about, we have a 10, ours is a 10 milligram per liter plant license, and we run at 8.4. So what we're putting into the aquifer is clear, is clean. You'll never get rid of all the nitrates, but that's the standard. This has all the injection well plants will not change that dynamic because it never touches the ground environment. It's down too low, goes right into the water system. Now we go on to a plant that puts it out on a drain field the same way a septic system does. The drain fields, okay, that water coming out of that drain to that drain field is clear. They have to have the same rules we do. It's tested. When it hits the drain field, though, it sits there as nice water until we turn on the sprinklers, the irrigation system, or it rains, and we've also used pesticides and feed and whatever, because all those, they have something called NPKs. That's the nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. These are in all these basically agricultural things. That mixes, the thing about nitrate, it's soluble in water. So here comes a nice clean water out on a drain field, which could eventually end up on a coral shelf and out, but it mixes now with, okay, all the pesticides and other impurities that are in these chemicals. If nitrates form immediately on that again, and now that's headed out on the coral shelf. Lastly, But that can be calculated, it can be minimized to a degree. I don't know, I have to find some statistics that tell me that for every square meter, well, this happens with acid rain and everything else, we could come up with something that says, this is how much we could save. Because we start with clean water and we go from there. Now we get to the residential septic systems, and this is a very real variable, because septic systems are not tested. We don't test them. So we don't know if the septic system is even doing its job, whether there's enough bacteria in it to remove the nitrates. It sends it out into their drain fields, and it mixes with, again, with the groundwater, and that could be very bad. So since it's not being tested, and septic systems don't know their failure until they have a failure. That's when they pull it out. They'll put a new septic system, they'll pump it out, to do whatever they need to do to get their system back running, but it's never tested. It restarts again, but it's never tested. This is the bigger problem and the tougher one to calculate. Although if I knew exactly, when I figure out exactly what that amount of, that calculation that says I'm going to reduce this much nitrogen and phosphorus by going to a sewer system, whatever that, then I can do the calculations and come up with a number. Now, I don't know environmentally whether that number is going to mean anything. It could mean a lot, but it may mean very little. We're talking very small volume numbers here. It's basically one milligram per liter is 1 part per million. So for every gallon of one thing, you got 1 million gallons of dilution. So in order to be able to come up with this will be the tricky part. The other stuff's easy. That's the tough one.
That sentence is from input from staff, the staff engineer. And
That person did that to me?
not, that is, don't point the finger at me. I'm just the vehicle here.
So she has the answer to that then. That
Well,
doesn't make sense.
she clearly has input, and I believe it's her intent to work with you to,
Yes. The answer is yes. How about that?
The answer,
No,
you have
Mr. Chair
that,
and-
you have that
and-
data.
And members, when grant applications are made, the probability of the question, what's the nutrient reduction, potential nutrient reduction if we get off septic tanks and package plants to a wastewater collection system? That's what they're gonna ask. So there's information statewide and nationally, lots of assumptions, but there's calculations that can be done to achieve this.
Good.
So that'll help answer the question for the grant writer so that we can get funding. So that's why that's in there, and we started it, we can work together in my office to look at the loading first. You know, it's lots of load.
So,
And then to calculate, based on certain assumptions, what are we going to reduce nutrient-wise, which basically means phosphorus and nitrogen. That's what they're looking at. That's what legislatively people look at, and when we discuss things about the environment and nutrients, it's phosphorus and nitrogen. So we can work together.
So is there anything that I said that was incorrect?
No, I mean, I thought that was very eloquently said.
Okay.
There's a lot of chemistry involved, but at the
Yes,
end
there
of the
is.
day, they're just gonna wanna know, what's the load reduction? How much are you taking out of the environment if we go through this exhaustive exercise of getting us to a wastewater collection system?
my question simply is that something that should be done by a licensed professional firm or by a member of this committee?
Well, we could work together, because he has more information on the package plants than I would ever have.
it
Does
would
that
be
make sense?
endorsed.
It has to be endorsed by her.
Absolutely.
Well,
Yeah.
Neil called me the expert. No, I'm just one of the guys.
I guess what I'm saying, I think it's great that you have this information and all this knowledge and can be an asset to them in compiling the information.
That's correct. That's what we're
Right.
trying to do.
Right, but I think at the end of the day, it ought to be on your letterhead.
Absolutely.
Sure,
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
of
I'm all
course,
for that.
absolutely.
She's gonna have to own it, not us.
No, I wasn't clear on that. It seemed like
Okay.
It's fine.
No,
you want
no,
Ron to-
but.
Basically,
I
he's
mean,
the lead person that will work with
You
staff.
just heard the soliloquy.
Yeah.
Would you
Yeah.
want to do it? I don't want to do it.
I thought you were forcing him to do it.
I'm trying to coerce him to do it, yes.
My only, what year would you like this done in? That's the only,
You can.
well, I'll work out with Lisa,
You
see if we
can
can't
tell
provide.
me, but I think I clearly picked the right person.
I'll start working on it. Toot sweet.
Thank you very much. All right, item number 2.
Do you have comments, please, on that item? Is that okay?
Not now,
Okay. We wait till the end of the meeting?
maybe.
Before you want to do individual topics?
You're here to listen to us this morning,
Yeah. Well, just a couple things missing, that's all I would
okay?
suggest.
You can send me a note after the meeting,
Okay.
or, but, yeah, we're trying to move along as a group that we don't
You're doing good.
get the ability to do normally. Okay, sewer system technology. I think we have to put a stake in the ground for today. I don't think we can put a stake in the ground for 10 years from now. But looking at what's transpired over the last 10 years, I have very little doubt that 5 years from now it will probably be just the same as it is today. Maybe the vacuum unit will be pink instead of blue or green, the two people that are building them now. But I don't think that'll change. But if you go look in the back of the roadmap, there's stuff from the state of Florida talking about the design criteria of a vacuum system. There is a section in there, pros and cons of vacuum versus gravity. At this point, I would just like to make my personal opinion known. I don't think there's much choice other than vacuum because of the impact that any other system would have on the rest of the town's infrastructure. Vacuum allows us less cost, less destruction of what we already have. It allows us the ability to piggyback on other systems that are in the ground because it's not vacuum's not restricted to a separate trench. According to Ingenuity, the vast majority of the piping that would go into town would go in non-roadways. We wouldn't be tearing up the road, and even in the neighborhoods, we have a pretty good chance of being able to go in the right away at the side of the road using technology that won't even tear up people's driveways. And so I would like us to, at least initially, to move forward with that being our baseline system. Does anyone else want to comment?
I agree with the vacuum system. If we're putting a stake in the ground today, I think by far it's the best one. It's cheaper, it's less destructive, more environmentally sensitive, so I agree.
John? Excuse me, not John. Ron, please. I'm looking the wrong way. Excuse me.
It appears unless we were willing to put in a series of lift stations from the south side to some spot coming across on the north side, it'll be a great expense and very deep in the ground. And it appears that from where the vacuum flow vac system, they seem to have a decent program. I had the opportunity to meet with the president that made the presentation last month, because I was concerned about how the multifamily area, especially the large ones where you had 150 people, how that thing would work. And it isn't as trivial as he makes it seem, and his cost was ludicrous. But we had a chance to go over it and kind of lay out what it would be like for Colonial Ridge, Crown Colony, to see what it would look like. And we did it on the back of a napkin, but it was just a beginning of a process but it appeared that it would be feasible. And it would also, it appears to be less costly, although I would be a little bit concerned about how all that really works. But at the end, because at the end of the day, when this thing gets done, it ends up in a big tank, and then a big force main sends it over to Boynton anyway.
Correct.
Okay, so it's a matter of how you design this thing to collect it, and it appears to be let's say, a simpler solution in the big picture. I think when you get down to the details, you're gonna find out that there's a lot of extra cost things that's gonna have to happen
Sure.
to certain communities, especially the multifamily ones. The individual homeowner, they'll tie 1, 2, or 3, or 4 of them together, and they'll put a tank in, and it'll work. When you start talking about 150 or 200 unit pieces like we have, it gets a little bit more complicated, especially if the sewer lines are internal to the place, not into the external where you can get to it.
Right.
So the price tag will start to rise. These are second level costs that would have to be considered.
Right. I've been corresponding with Mr. Radner.
Yeah.
As recently as yesterday. After talking to you and after talking again to Lisa Trepepi, he envisions now a southern unit, a northern unit. Don and I walked the town, a few sites. It looks like there's enough available space in Woolbright to put a southern station that would service the big units
south.
in the south. At the north end, the ideal situation is to cooperate in some way with Boynton, but absent that, we have a potential use of something at the end of Coconut Lane. John now says for what would the word be? For backup, he would now and thinks it would be prudent to have 2 crossings instead of 1. He said it could actually be done with 1, but the redundancy of 2 crossings would probably be the best solution. So we're probably going to end up with a large station in the south, perhaps a smaller one in the north, and 2 crossings. That's after him going back to Australia and talking to his engineering people. Does that summarize it pretty good?
So there's 2 different vendors that
Correct.
can provide the, everything that we need in the ground when construction comes along, which is actually wonderful, because we never had that opportunity to have 2 different vendors. There's always been one, and it's always been a sole source, and sole sources have its own negatives to them. So having that information from 2 different sources allows us to, if we move forward with, say, preliminary plans, because you already have a conceptual plan, we could pull from 2 different sources. It would be no different than when we designed the south phase drainage system, where we used experts to craft a submersible pump, like we do at the Woolbright Station and at Tropical. And then when the construction plans come along, you make sure it says, and approved equal. That way you can have both companies compete. So there's no sole source here. The good news is we're getting information from two different groups that can install the improvements when the time comes.
A couple thoughts, if I might.
Go.
One is, it was a great presentation we got from the gentleman from Australia. My thought is, we just all need to keep in mind that he was a salesman. Well,
Right.
Absolutely.
No doubt.
Right?
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
I'll leave it at that. So, as I said previously, in concept, it appears that vacuum is the best way to go.
And that's a good word of putting it, concept.
And because my one thought, and I had a brief conversation with Lisa about this, and Ron, I think, is that when they get in to do the specific details, it may turn out that maybe something on the south end should be gravity or whatever. So, or something else. But I just want to point out that
Right.
that could be the concept now. there may be a tweak at the end, which then leads me to my last point, is that how and when is that determination made as to, okay, what is the actual system? When do we do that preliminary engineering, or do we go out to a different bunch of companies and say, okay, what system do we get? So,
Well, I think at this point, we have a concept plan. We don't have
Can-
an engineering plan yet, correct?
Correct. Can I just make a clarification? Because I went back and read my recommendations in the feasibility study. And in there, I specifically stated that if there was a vacuum system, it would be somewhat of a hybrid, because the multifamily areas, like the Crown Colonies and Colonial Ridges, have on-site gravity. So I just want to clarify, when I said that, I meant that they're not going to change their gravity system on their property.
Right.
It's only going to change where their package plant is located.
Okay.
So, no, I just
hold
wanted
on.
to make
I-
a
no,
clarification that if you all come to the conclusion that we go vacuum system, everybody goes vacuum system. It's just that on-site, their systems will stay gravity, because it's got to get to
But what I want to
the point of
interject here,
connection.
Lisa, is
I-
the
yeah.
main system, the town's sewer system, that portion is vacuum. What is on an individual
Right.
property
I just
is
wanted-
no different than what's on my single-family house. That's going to be
Gravity.
gravity to that.
Right,
to
so
that
I just
station.
wanted to clarify that, because
okay,
I
so-
don't
I-
want the word hybrid being out there because
I-
it's not hybrid.
right,
okay,
that's
so-
why I'm making
right,
that
so-
clarification, because
No, let me-
you
so-
and I did talk
Right.
briefly, and I did use that word, so
Oh,
I
no, so-
apologize for that.
No, that's fine. So,
But I just wanted everybody to understand that we're not changing the multifamily's systems.
Right.
Only at that point of connection.
Property
That's what
line
it changes.
connection.
If,
are you
if I
saying,
may, excuse me, if I may, the gravity system, for example, for Crown Colony, ends up at a huge lift station that takes it into the treatment plant. He cannot build a tank big enough, okay, one of his tanks where it opens up with draw and a float switch, for the amount of volume that comes in through that.
Are you
And
talking,
his-
is that a buffer tank? Is that the right word?
yeah, what
Okay.
if that tank they use, I don't know, he's got a term for it. It's a collection tank, and then when it gets to a certain level, it opens up a valve and the
Well, that's a
vacuum
vacuum
pulls
pit
it out.
when it's on your
That's a
property.
vacuum pit.
A large
That's
vacuum pit.
That, he's gotta have a large vacuum pit with the volume that goes through there, which at times of on average is about 15,000 gallons a day. He realizes that one may not do it. So he may have to take two, okay, in the Crown Colony case, to bring it into the main, depending upon where the main line comes across. He'd have to, matter of fact, he left me to go back, actually to talk to people about the engineering of that particular development. The others are relatively simple. They come down to a lift station, you eliminate the lift station, you put the like Colonial Ridge, for example. That takes care of Colonial Ridge. Ocean Manor is another subject at a different time, but they will, in fact, be simpler to hook up than it would be for, say, a Crown Colony, which has, as she points out, is an internal pipes. Okay, so one of the things that they might, I'm not sure exactly how that's going to, and I still am not convinced, okay, with his system, that that's a workable solution without some infrastructure change, for example, to Crown Colony. It's maybe. I don't know enough about his system to know if he's got that kind of volume, be able to pick up that kind of volume, and then pull it, okay, to a station from one vat. It appears it'll need several. It's just a conversation. So
Right.
this is the next level of detail, in my opinion.
Correct.
I agree with you. It's the big picture. If you want to, yeah, gravity is not a good long-term solution, but yet vacuum flow appears to be a better solution from the sales pitch. Okay.
Right.
And even after I talked to him, he was much more less salesy, more technical, because I forced the conversation that way.
Right.
But it still, it was he was minimizing the difficulty, but I knew he had an issue.
I'm basing my decision not only on what I heard from Flowback, I'm basing it on the town of Palm Springs, that has 3 of these systems operating basically in a town area about our size, although they don't have the concentration of condo units like we have in the south. But they are very satisfied, and when discussing it, they thought that would work here.
Something
Go ahead.
comes to my mind, though, that where this all started in the first place, with Boynton wanting to put a pipe, okay, from the Winn-Dixie, the new development over there, over to the Crown Colony property, and having all the gravity systems go through there. When that came, that's just wasn't gonna happen, all right? We asked them for a Plan B. I asked them at this meeting when they stood up and gave their presentation. They had no Plan B. What they did instead is they threw in the towel and said, we're not gonna do anything with it until you guys figure out what you want. Just wondering if this, now all of a sudden we found a location that we thought was off limits, which I take is on the northwest corner of Woolbright and Ocean Avenue.
That's correct. Right next
In that field there where the drainage field was, whatever that's called there. And then I take it then they would run a pipe from there underneath the Intracoastal Waterway over to something that connects up, I guess, by Wendy's or someplace like that,
Correct.
all right?
Yes.
Why didn't they come up with that before? They would have had an easier sell on the gravity system.
Well,
I think at that time, they had already had permits and they were ready to proceed because of their project they had across the bridge.
well,
I find that an excuse rather than an action item, but it seems, it just perplexes me. It forced us, because there was no way to get from the south side to a station, but now we have a solution for it with vacuum flow, which we didn't have that solution, okay, with gravity.
right.
So it was just strange the way this all played out.
Well, I think one of the shortcomings here is they, and you being one of the users in the south end, were looking at a unique solution, and Boynton never, I didn't think, look at that and say, wait a minute, this is really the nucleus of a solution for the south end of Ocean Ridge, and think a little bigger. And a little bit bigger would have been, we don't need to put something on your property. We need to solve your problem, but we don't need to put it on your property. And we need to get a foothold in the town and build from that initial thing. And that opportunity went over.
The town commissioners asked for that to be expanded. When this first came out, it was
Right.
just about the south side, when they were gonna put that pipe across.
That it
The
never-
town commissioner
that
said, we
didn't
wanna
happen.
see a broader picture of this
Right.
for the whole town. At that point in time, they could have come up with Plan B that they didn't. They were wanting to push an issue.
Right.
Or they didn't have, Tracy may be correct, is that they had that whole process across in Boynton going, that
Right.
they didn't want to change it at this point in time, because they already had the infrastructure partly built.
Right.
So, yeah, I think the timing was, it's kind of pushes us into a position to use a vacuum system. It's not, gravity is probably just not an option.
So Lisa, maybe we can put the hybrid issue to rest. But let me
It's
just,
semantics, it's all,
It's dangerous semantics.
can I just,
Well, I have to say, in my defense, I wrote on-site gravity.
I'm not picking on you.
No,
I'm trying to send a clear message to,
You need a defender.
you
Well-
know the thing, can I ask just one question? Just
Yes,
one question.
I just wanted to clarify, that's all.
Understood. So what what you said in your report and what you're saying now is that those on the south side, for them, in the public right of way, not what they do on property, that's something separate. But for them to connect to a facility, let's say in the retention area on Woolbright,
Right.
that connection would be vacuum and not gravity, and there would be no benefit of having a small piece being gravity versus vacuum. That's what you're saying in your report, correct?
That's right.
Okay,
It's
so
all, it's you either
it's all,
townwide vacuum or townwide
thank you.
gravity. Does that,
Perfect. Thank
I
you.
know we're a little offline from the rest.
No, I think that's what we were saying.
Would you accept in your non-hybrid solution, okay, that a plant that has 17% of the towns in it stay running as a regular treatment plant with an injection well? Trust me, that question is gonna come up.
Well,
Okay.
I know, I'm responding to it's all or
hold on,
nothing,
I'm
you
gonna
know.
expound on that. I've had a discussion with DEP, and one of the other subjects that DEP brought up was putting a whole bunch of systems like yours in our town and not doing anything with going to the treatment plant. But politically, it also sounds that what's being talked about at the state level, not at the local level, the gentleman that I talked to in Palm Beach, is that injection of any kind, at least on a plant package size, may be targeted for elimination. So that in itself is risky, and to find other places in town to do the injection sites,
It really,
that's hard also.
it really comes down to the risk of nitrogen contamination into groundwater. I mean, this is what we're really trying to eliminate. I pointed that out at the beginning of this. And we happen to be in an area that's high for nitrogen input, but the vulnerability of the risk to groundwater is actually low. It's because of the shelf, okay? If you're out in the middle of the country,
Right.
where you got lots of pesticides,
Right.
you have a high risk, okay, of nitrates, you have a high risk that it goes into the water supply. As you go down to the different areas, especially in the far west, you find out that the area for that is very low for that, because it's all woods, and you're very low that's why they have clean water running on streams. So you look at us, okay, in Florida, we are basically called by the USGS, we're considered high risk for it, but low risk for vulnerability, okay, to contaminate the groundwater. And I think that's why we're having trouble, or the state is, coming up with counties or whatever to mandate this,
Right.
because the risk is relatively low in certain communities. Ours, I believe, is one of them.
Right.
So, if I may, our attorney is here, and he's been sitting here very quietly, but no one should be allowed to escape this one. So, the question that goes to what Ron was asking, what does, you don't have to answer this now, but what does state law say if there is a sewer line in front of your property? I know in some jurisdictions, and I don't know whether it's state law or local, that says if there's a line there, you have to connect within X number of years. Or would it be possible to exclude them from a townwide system?
Not if there's
Not gonna happen.
Well, most, I can speak, in most cases, language like that for sure is in local ordinances. The reason it's in local ordinances is because of bonding.
Right.
Because it is very difficult to get a bond when the bank is not aware of, okay, you are forcing everyone to connect, and so, because it's going to be a revenue bond. And so therefore, you need to show us you're going to have the revenue, because if you come to us, the bank, and say, well, people may or may not connect, it's kind of like, all right, you aren't guaranteeing revenue.
Right.
Exactly. So you know the answer. I mean, I get it, but I mean, state law, I can take a look at that and see for sure. Local law, in order to enact a revenue bond, I would imagine any bank, and this is what would probably require us to have something in place that guarantees that revenue, which would mean that we would probably have to guarantee that everybody would need to connect.
Yeah, that's the answer.
Can we defer this topic
my just question-
to the next meeting?
Yeah, my just question is-
We're just having fun here.
This is going to, this is like a balloon we're gonna now blow up, and it's gonna get bigger and bigger. Because this topic is gonna branch out. And I do wanna have the discussion, but I'd like to have it in more of the money context. Do we have a consensus then of where we are today and taking a position on technology?
Yes.
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 A majority. Thank you.
And that technology is the vacuum system.
Thank
Thank you. For the record, for the
I'm sorry.
record.
I'm sorry.
For the record.
Okay.
Well, wait a second.
All right, let's move into the third item, which is startup funding. So this is the seed money concept that I would like to introduce. Let's see, that would be on the page that says financial, if you'd like to put
Page
that up
4.
for the people in the audience, please. All right, so if the town manager could give us a little explanation of local government infrastructure surtax, please.
Okay, so the local government surtax is, that was initiated by the state and the county. We have a certain amount of revenue that comes in through that penny sales tax. So when that money comes in, it's streamed into an earmarked fund. So right now, it's going into our reserves, but it's earmarked specifically for the penny sales tax. We have an infrastructure surtax committee that meets once a year to kind of look at different projects and also give a report to the town commission, letting them know how we have spent that money each year. To date, we have not spent any money out of that fund, and we currently have $342,000. Over the next several years, we will bring it up to $1 million, and that's when that sunsets, or the county will say, okay, we're gonna continue.
Okay, so that's what I'm talking about in item number 1 and 2 there. And if the commission could further earmark that money for this project, or create a general infrastructure investment fund, a dedicated infrastructure investment fund, this would be just one of several potential uses. But if we could do that, and then under item number 4 or item number 6, if we can leverage that 1 million and over 5 years try to get it to something on the order of $3.5 to $5 million. I'm just showing 2 different ways that you could get to that. And one, if you're familiar with your tax bill, you pay your garbage assessment now as a non-ad valorem assessment. So you'll see an amount that you're billed in that section at the bottom of your tax bill.
Actually, no, Neil,
Or
that,
whatever-
sorry to
or
interrupt
whatever
you.
that-
We send out invoices every year for that.
Okay,
It's not on the
what's
tax bill.
125 that's in there then? 175 that's in there is an non-ad, I brought my tax.
Solid waste authority.
Solid waste.
That's direct to solid waste authority. Okay, I see what you're saying. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So there's an item like that on your bill now. And with the number of parcels that we have in the town, 1,471, doing it at approximately $250 a year for approximately 5 years, will get you about another $3.5 million. The other choice is item 4, which would be increase the millage rate and take it as out of the taxable property value assessment. My personal reflection on that is, I don't think that would be taken very well. Listening to the budget discussions that occur every year, we fight over much less than a 0.25 increase in our tax assessment. So I would like to advocate that we do it on a per parcel, a non-ad valorem charge. If we do this, does anyone else?
I have a question, because I don't quite understand where this money sits, and is that money protected? Meaning,
Yes,
is it like a reserve account where
Yes.
you
It's
can
a
only use
reserve.
it for that particular purpose?
yes.
I would like to strengthen the
makes me happy.
language of how it's set aside and what it's set aside for. That's part of this, depending on what happens with the water pipes under the water contract, this same kind of fund could support things that we would have to do to our own water infrastructure, depending on what decision we make with Boynton. So I would see this as sort of an ongoing thing. It could also apply, if it continued over a long period of time, could also be used, correct me if I'm wrong, for drainage issues, right?
Yeah, so is it all infrastructure, it's covered under an infrastructure kind of category?
You're talking about what we're collecting now for the penny sales tax?
Yeah.
Not only the penny sales tax, but this extra money that we would
Whatever.
start putting into this fund.
Okay, the penny sales tax, that's totally separate. We have to go by the county ordinance, so that,
That's-
infrastructure is one of the
Correct.
things. So yes, that would
That's the term.
qualify.
That would qualify.
Right.
And then we would create this additional fund and use both of them to do this kind of work or other kinds of work, independently of trying to figure out how to get a separate bond or to take it out of our normal general fund budget process. Go ahead,
Yes.
please, jump in.
So this money's already been collected, there's a committee.
The 342, yes.
I'm curious if we know, what is the committee's view on the intended use for those funds? What's the commission's view? I mean, have they been collecting that with the intent of using it for some project, or are they just saying,
I'm
let's
on
just
that
collect it?
committee. I'm on that committee. It's made up of both the active and, and the alternate members of the P and Z. That's who forms that committee. And we've had the discussion, and they consider this one of the appropriate uses of that money.
Yes.
No, there's no doubt that this would be an appropriate use. I just don't know, has that board said, okay, what were their plans? Do they have any plans at this point? to
This
use
is
it?
one of the plans.
They've discussed several different options, but nothing that
Okay.
they have decided to move forward on at this
Okay.
point.
That's, okay.
But the money has not been touched so far, and it's, isn't it good for 10 years?
Well, you collect it for 10
10
years.
Right.
Now, I'm not sure if we've got to spend it within that time period. You collect it for the 10-year period. And I guess there's limitations as far as what it can be spent for.
Right.
And that's presented by, how the penny sales tax was allowed to take place in the first place.
Right. Now, there are.
So I would like us to make a recommendation.
Can I just give you some more
Yeah,
information
sorry,
first?
go.
Yeah, I'll just give you some more information that you need. We have a state revolving fund loan right now for our drainage improvements that we've
Right.
done throughout the town. That was a 7 million bond, and that will be paid off in 2025, so that's 5 years. And currently, we pay about $460,000 per year for that bond. So that will be available in 5 years to maybe go out and get another bond. We have also the town hall bond. When we built town hall, we took out a $4 million bond, and we pay $312,000 per year on that one. That one sunsets in 2027.
this is sort of, I took a quick glance at those a while back, and I think that one of them is clearly refundable right now. And I don't know whether the town's looking into that, but interest rates are so absurdly low right now that I'd suggest you might look into refinancing both of those loans, because it's probably safe.
We've done a swap loan already.
Oh, that's right, you did that. Don't
Yeah.
get me started on swaps.
Exactly.
But
That
the
was
one-
actually a really bad decision.
It was.
Yes.
I'm
Years
sorry.
ago, they did that, and it was a bad decision.
So, but the other one I think can be refinanced at this time, and you might want to look into.
The town hall one, yeah.
Any other comments?
And you're proposing that we raise all this 3 million or whatever for what purpose?
For infrastructure. And this would be one of those uses.
Like this, I think what you had envisioned was when we go out for grant funding, we have to have matching funds, correct? So this kind of would be our nest egg for matching funds for a grant to start the project several years down the road.
Correct.
Okay.
You look perplexed, Dorothy.
So this is pre-planning to
I'm
get
not
that
a
money.
bond- I'll just state it, I'm not a bond person. Bonds are not cheap. It doesn't matter how we do it, whatever we do with a bond, we are gonna pay more than we are gonna pay doing it this sort of way. And to me, this is piggy bank money.
It's a savings account.
It's a savings account, and we need to start the process in the town of having a piggy bank, a rainy day account. And
Don't we have-
Just for this purpose?
Don't we have like?
We
For
do
any-
have,
for
we do have
infrastructure.
reserves.
We have reserves.
I think what he's
I'm not
talking
saying
about though is,
this not-
is
This
like,
goes beyond septic to sewer, this is infrastructure. And
Are there percentages of a breakdown of what goes to what, or can that be set up?
I think that would be up to the commission as to how to word the future allocation of this, or the dedication, earmarking of it, but
it can be restricted funds.
Because if we want $5 million, that's a big number that you're gonna have to
it's
set
not a
aside.
big number when you start doing anything.
No, but to set aside now a percentage breakdown.
No, but you're not setting aside $5 million. You're literally setting aside, what, just a little over $1 million a year as it accrues? It's not $5 million now.
No.
It's literally $250 per parcel in the town.
So it appears that the next step is to pursue grant funding, right? So in order to do that, they're gonna ask questions, and some of the questions, besides nutrient load reduction, is where's your set aside dedicated for this project? And they may say, I don't know what the question exactly is going to be, but you all need to be able to say that we have money allocated. Now, however they ask us to do it, then we should do it so that we could check the box that says yes, and when we go to submit for the grant application. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does to me. I mean, that's what the grant guy was saying when he was here.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't know whether it's millions.
I don't know, but be flexible enough to know that they're gonna ask that question, and we need to be able to have the ability to be affirmative that, yes, we do, this is how we have it dedicated. I don't know how much it's gonna be, or what percentage are they going to request out of the overall cost, I don't know, but
It's gonna
these
depend
are
on the
all,
grant.
we're anticipating these questions to be asked of us when we go to apply, and we wanna be able to say yes, 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 so.
Well, I have a couple thoughts, I'll be the naysayer here. Number one is, I don't know whether, this is beyond, I don't know whether the town can simply levy a $250 charge per parcel for not having a specific assessment. I mean, I always thought most assessments require some type of assessment study to.
I mean, and I wasn't going to say anything, but since you're bringing it up, we don't have the right to tax. Okay, there are certain fees that we can impose if we spend money on, say, like for the garbage service, things like that. Other than that, the only other way that I'm kind of aware of, unless you do some sort of a taxing type of unit or something like that, that are involve different things, and that's more dealing with the finance people, but The only other way I'm aware of that you can like impose a fee that you're talking about is through a special assessment process. And based on that, it would have to be based on, the only way you can collect a fee is you would have to show that there's a proportionate balance between the fee that you're collecting and the benefit that the property owner is receiving. So on something like this, I don't know if you're talking about, it may be based on square footage, it may be based on house size, may be based on something, if you're talking about sewer, I'm not quite sure. Most special assessments that I've done, it's kind of like front footage or lot size. It's very simple. It's beautification type of things. So, we would have to look into that, but you're right, and there's a whole process, there's public hearings, there's all of that stuff involved to set up something like that.
And can you assess on, for something that's not, you don't know what the expenditure is, you don't know what the benefit is?
Well, I hear you, and we would have to have plans in place. We would have to have something in place to say, this is the reason that we're assessing this amount of money, because this is what we need, and it may be to conduct a study to do this. Then we have a plan in place to say it cost X number of dollars, so that's what we're trying to collect for. But we would have to have that stuff in place in order to go the special assessment route.
It's my understanding that Raftellus is going to be instrumental in giving us that information. That's one of the things that they're going to be working on for the town. They can answer your questions.
Well, I think they know the answers. Anyway, so just, I for one, am not prepared to support adding some type of assessment to put monies in for matching funds for grants, and
That's not what I'm putting it in here for.
well, I guess
That's not what I'm advocating. I'm advocating that we create an infrastructure investment fund, not a grant support fund. It facilitates getting a grant, but that is the secondary purpose. Septic-to-sewer is just one of the infrastructure issues that we have and will have ongoing, and I'm just putting this concept out.
I just would just say, I think it's a concept worth discussing. I think as a Septic-to-Sewer committee, I'm not sure why we take a position on a larger infrastructure fund.
Shouldn't be the commissioners who make a decision?
Commissioners would make a decision. All we're doing is advocating, we're recommending. And I'm putting it out there. I think it's something we should recommend that the commission look at. We have no authority to do anything. I'm quite aware of that. But I think this is something that I think should have already been in place. Our neighboring communities have this, and I think it's a very sound financial thing to do.
I'm having trouble with the terminology, actually. You're just talking about reserve accounts?
A reserve account, yes.
Is
Yes.
reserve accounts protected?
It depends.
Yes?
There's restricted and unrestricted.
Okay. And I would think that a reserve account would have a pinpointed purpose, like sewer infrastructure?
It depends. Some of your reserves right now are unrestricted, and then some of them are restricted.
I think Neil's proposing restricted,
Yes,
Yes,
absolutely.
yes, he is.
Absolutely.
which I would support that.
I would support a restricted, just for this purpose.
All right, so I think we have a 3-to-1 support of that idea. But I don't think it's anything more than that, but and Roy's not here. Wish he was, but,
Is this just a checklist of things that you wanted to just check off on this one, saying that's how we see it, so when we put the final thing together, this is what it is going to look
Yeah, it's
at?
going to be part of your recommendation
Right.
to the
All right.
commission.
because, and that's, I think we just about flogged grant funding to death already, so I don't know if we need to go there anymore, other than, getting ready to ask to go ahead and do it. Do we have any consensus on asking based on the grant person making a presentation to the commission, that if that stays on track, that we would ask to start the process of doing a grant in septic to sewer. Do we? Anyone?
Is that different than what you just talked about with a restricted reserve account?
Yeah, I mean, getting a grant is different than the restricted
Right.
account.
Okay,
So I'm just asking now is, should we start the process of, after you get your environmental study, after the commission talks to the grant person, there's gonna be some commitment of, I don't know, what are we talking, did we say about $6,000 or something he was talking about for a grant?
Yes.
Starting a grant procedure, that we would support the commission.
Going after a planning grant,
Pardon?
going after a planning grant, correct?
Correct.
Yes.
yes.
Yes. Okay, so that one's unanimous. All right, so, for the next, meeting, I've done a whole bunch of, modeling on, the data from PAPA that I'll make available to the committee members rather than just that big raw dump that we got from PAPA. Again, for your comments or whatever, and if we could, a whole bunch of the topics that we deferred about the money, if we could start digging into those at the next meeting, and after that meeting, know where we are with the RAPTELIS
Okay.
proposal.
Mhm.
Could you ask Raptelis, suggest that we ask them, so in light of where we are, we're going, what they might recommend for different parts of the study? And
Sure.
we could address that.
Yes.
Do individual members have anything else, any topic they would like to bring up or
Not this-
identify for the next meeting?
I'll see what I can do to give you some data for the next meeting. I'll send it to
Okay.
Tracy in advance, so you can have a look at it. I'll work with Lisa. That's always fun. And we'll come up with something, at least be able to put a statistical model together, put numbers to this. Hopefully that would ease our mind on the environmental impact. We'll see what we can do.
Okay. Should we ask for more public comment or not?
It's the chairman's choice. Terry left, so.
Anyone have any public comments as the last item of the meeting?
It's more a question than a comment. Well, Ron, and you thoroughly confused me and delighted me with your explanation, but thank you. I got a
Years
tenth
of
of it.
math and numbers.
Oh, my goodness. But,
Christine, can you state your name? for
yes,
the record?
sure. Christine Hassett, 29 Sable Island Drive. When you're looking at these different things, you and Lisa, I've also heard that there are systems out there that could help prolong the life of maybe some of our older systems, waiting for this 5 to 10 year whatever build up. And I would love to know if there are things like that. Someone told me there's something like an aerator almost that drops into your existing tank, and I'm talking single family. And it could actually help reduce that nitrogen level even further than just, your regular drain field. Because most of our, yes, you do. Because most of our systems with the older homes are probably 10, 15, 20 years old. So if there was, and I'm not asking you to do any extra work at all, but if there is such a thing, while you're looking at the reduction of the environmental impact, it might be an option that we might want to just educate our residents on if there's actually something like that available. So.
Okay, we can do
Yeah, we'll take a look at that. The treatment plants actually do that. They have the blower motors in them and it moves that around, so
I'm
that
pretty
it
sure
does-
I don't have one though.
Yeah, I'm sure you don't.
Mitigation is a category that we're going to eventually be getting to, but I like how you're tying it back to the environmental study, so maybe we could do that earlier.
Because I think everybody wants to be a good community citizen, and I agree, it may
Maybe we
not
can have
happen
an
for
answer.
another 5 to 10 years, so if we have some solutions in between, particularly if any of these systems, not only environmentally are good, but they actually help you save money, sometimes that gets people's attention too, so, okay.
Anyone else, please?
I'm Britt Flanagan. I'm from 5556 North Ocean Boulevard. I'm also Vice President of the Ocean Ridge Yacht Club. We just received an assessment, an inspection by the Department of Health, and we are now in non-compliance, and we are going to have to replace our tanks, we'll either have to replace the whole system at over $360,000, not including labor and sludge hauls, or a partial restoration of the plant, which will be in excess of $100,000. It's $96,000 just to replace tanks. My question is, based on this, the Boynton Beach proposal and Ron's statement regarding the sewer plants being in compliance, if we go to the, I hate to say word, hybrid system, since we would be the gravity piece of that, what should we do? I mean, I'm going to call Boynton just to make sure that, based on their assessment, that we wouldn't have to rebuild our plant after partially putting in a restoration. So these are some concerns, and if any of you have any enlightenment for me, that would be very helpful, because right now we probably have to do this by summer.
Why don't you and I have a conversation offline? I think there's alternatives, but let's take a look at it. I understand your situation clearly, but the bottom line is that you've got a 50 or 55 units there, 50?
50 units.
50 units. You have 50 units, okay, that have centralized sewage treatment. You've got to fix it. I mean,
Right.
that's the bottom line here.
Well,
So if we can find a
know
way,
that, right.
we can find a way where your license, okay, can be made it easier with some technology and some changes. I'd like to talk to you about that
Okay.
offline. I don't think we need to do it here. But
Okay, yeah, and we're looking at, now, we've heard that there's now a plexiglass that you can use to
Yeah.
reline your tank. So other than
yeah,
doing
We're-
the steel, plan.
you've heard the same things that we would discuss too.
Okay, all right, great.
I had the same thing with a concrete plant. Those tanks sometimes need to be relined. So it's
all right, and maybe I could talk to Lisa, because, and I have some other things, but I'll wait till the next meeting.
all right.
But thank you all for all the great work, and, I've done a lot of work with trying to get reserve funding for Ocean Ridge. We finally did that, and we're moving ahead on that. But as a citizen, I think we're foolish, especially, given the community, the state statutes that will be coming out. I think it's something that is imminent, and or else we're going to be putting huge assessments upon the citizenry in the future if we don't plan ahead. And planning ahead, I think, is very important. We've done a lot of work with funding and getting grants, and the details are flexible, but if you don't have a plan in place and a real vision, then you're in big trouble. So thank you for taking the time to listen
you.
to me. Do I need to sign that okay.
Anyone else? Entertain a motion to adjourn.
Well, motion to adjourn.
Second.
Thought for you.
I've got to read.